Hey now, welcome to the dirty side of the track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm a very tired Brian, that's a very tired Rob. We stayed up to watch the Australian GP.
Sorry, red flag. I don't like the way you started this.
Did you invest in red flags and you want to use them all the time? I got a red flag on clearance.
Yeah, it's we'll get to that. They may have featured today slightly.
Oh my God. And while we're here getting us started, Ramadan Mubarak to all observing. May your daily fasts be easy. But yeah, man, this was a sort of quiet week leading up to a GP I was really excited about, a good quali, and then what the heck just happened?
I don't know, so we'll pick the bones out of that one when we get there. What we got today? We got news and social. Things were a little bit, like you say, it was quiet, but there was a little, some bits and pieces that we picked up along the way. We'll hit our review of practice, quali, the race. There might be some moments we have to discuss around that.
I'd like chaos, but this was too much.
We've got Pit Lane Paul's take on things. We've got a new feature we're launching this week called In the Marbles, where we have a listener send in their 10-word race review as to how they saw it unfold. So listener Lee picked an absolute epic one to open with. Bit of fantasy update, and then some kind of scratching around to wonder what we're going to be doing next week. Oh no, we've also got DRS with Brett, right?
We do.
Whew, wow. Action-packed, so let's jump right in. Valtteri is on like some huge promotional drive at the moment. Everywhere you move, we've got some new social posting from Valtteri, and quite honestly, I love it. So as well as all the different hoodies and vests that we've seen them rocking, Valtteri showed the helmet that he had for this race weekend, designed by Aboriginal artist Ricky Kildare. I'm going to say that's how you say it. They're going to auction it off after the race weekend on F1 Authentics, with all the proceeds going to save the children. So if we've got any like wealthy listeners out there that really want to invest in something, just give a little bit to charity and then come and invest in the pod instead. No, I mean bid on the helmet, because it will be super cool. It was a really good looking helmet.
It was cool, very cool, great way to give back to charity. Some weird conversation this week, and actually kind of a continuation of the last couple weeks, about Lewis's contract and what that means for him, Mercedes, and the future. And a couple weeks ago, all of these, less than reputable Twitter accounts started saying, oh, he's going to end up at Ferrari. And then it started kind of catching wind, and the question then became, will he actually be at Mercedes if there's not a shot at glory? A, from a cost to Mercedes, and B, from a Lewis spending his twilight years, if we can call it that, because he's still quite good, chasing for something that may not be in the car. However, all that narrative in my mind kind of went out the window when we got to quali this weekend, because all of a sudden the Mercedes not as bad as advertised.
Yeah, but not winning anything, is it? So it was interesting to see it. It was interesting to see that story unfold from both perspectives, because actually I found quite a lot of credibility in both sides of the coin, right? You've got Mercedes looking at the gazillions that they're spending on him and going, will it be time to kind of for us to pull the plug and move George, I guess, into number one and have someone else come in behind and look at the amount of money they spend as an organisation. And then, like you say, Lewis, does he need to start putting the feelers out there for a move to a team that could maybe give him a shot at more race wins? Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if this is a little blip. Like you say, Mercedes kind of got back there this weekend, but we'll find out a bit more as the season unfolds, I guess. But it was interesting. What wasn't interesting was the FIA Fun Police coming to town. I get that you don't want to wait for a tragedy before you then do retroactive, we need to make fences stronger or whatever it might be. But the FIA this week said that the teams won't be allowed to climb on the pit wall fence anymore to welcome the race winner or, their drivers over the line to celebrate. And
why?
I don't know. I mean, it's not like... I don't believe we've had any near misses. I don't believe we've had any kind of moments where a fence is like half gone and everybody have gone there. It does just feel like it's health and safety brigade gone a little bit mad going, look, I get it. All that weight on a fence, does it have the potential to fall into the track? If it did, would that be catastrophic? Yes. So I can kind of see that point, but really... I mean, they're supposed to hold back. Like if a car crashed, they're supposed to be able to withstand the forces of stuff coming at them at huge amounts of speed, these fences. So a couple of guys climbing on them...
I wanted to say we've been doing this for 73 years of Formula One, but I realized I was wrong, because for the first 20 or so odd years, people just stood on the track and waved at the drivers as they went by. So this is already a huge improvement, as you said, on a fence designed to withstand a crash. and we've got 10 or 15 people, men and women, cheering their drivers on as they go by. And that's not allowed. I thought the NFL had cornered the market in the no fun league category, but the FIA is I don't have an acronym for them, but it is not a good look. I mean, come on, let's have some fun. And by the way, Rob and I were very curious about this, and we pinged Paul over WhatsApp on this, and he also thought this was ridiculous. But anyway, shifting gears, Fernando Alonso, the man of the hour. Everybody's the belle of the ball, even though he wasn't 2 years ago. Now he's the flavor that's exciting and fun. He made good on a Saudi Arabia conversation, and he'd said if he got into first at the start of the race in Saudi Arabia, he would take the team out for a beer. And so in Australia, on his Instagram post, you see the team dinner with like 75 people there, and they went out to dinner as opposed to for a beer. Good on you, Fernando.
Yeah, I thought so as well. It was nice gesture there on Fernando's part. Not only did he actually kind of just not make a bet and then not see it through, he kind of actually raised his own stakes on himself. It's like, well, I see my beer and I raise me a dinner. But going back to a face that we did see around the race weekend, but only really every now and again just to give the crowd something to cheer about, was Danny Rick. And
the crowd went nuts every time they showed him on TV. You could hear the crowd, the roar of the crowd, as he's just standing in the garage, and it's like
looking a little bit awkward every time the camera's right in his face and he hears the cheer. He's like, "Hi, I'm not racing or have a seat, but thanks." But 1980s champion Alan Jones thinks that Daniel got a little bit too distracted for off-the-track activities at a time when he really needed to knuckle down and kind of secure his place in the McLaren team. And we kind of said this before, that we felt that maybe is he a little bit too much of the good time guy with the smile that F1 loves, and good old Danny Rick, he's always good for a laugh, and that's what Drive to Survive dined out on. I'd like to think he's a lot more professional than that, but this is somebody inside the sport looking at it and going, yeah, I think you kind of didn't really focus. And he went on to say he doesn't see him getting a drive again in F1.
Even though now Danny Rick is saying there's stuff in the works, there's a chance I'll be back next year.
Do you think he's just saying that to try to get others to sniff around going, oh, maybe we should act if we want Danny Rick? I mean, it could just be a complete...
I don't know, but somewhere around 3:30 in the morning today, I started figuring out what seats might be available, and I don't think they're any better than the ones that were available last year.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Speaking of Red Bull and Horner real quick, they put up the sign, Red Bull Ford Powertrains, at the new Red Bull, or not new, but at the Red Bull Ford Powertrain campus, as they get ready for 26, and there's a big picture of Christian Horner and Jim Farley and the Ford sign with the Red Bull. It's pretty cool, man. 26 is really far away. I can't believe
it's not really.
Logos.
We're in 23, Brian.
Years, 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's really not much time in the world of anything, really, is it? Time flies.
I'll still be 38 in 2.5 years. So.
Yeah, you will. Okay, so I never know how to say this guy's name, so I'm going to try it one last time. Here we go. Stefano Domenicali?
Nope, you were good. Domenicali is the way I
okay, that guy.
Yeah,
he really wants to get rid of
the first name.
He wants to get rid. I just go by even
and
if
I'm just using the American
turns.
version,
I just call him Stefano.
I got it wrong as well. I'm sure.
He'd like to get rid of free practice days.
Why?
He doesn't want days that have nothing on the line. He wants every day to have something competitive, and he also kind of thinks that there's maybe, although I couldn't find a direct quote on this, I don't know if it was the journalist writing the piece that was just kind of inferring, but there's too much time for the teams to hone their setup and get absolutely nailed for the race. So it kind of gets rid of that kind of jeopardy that, like when we've seen races that have had disrupted practices or lots of rain and then the race is dry, you do get a little bit more kind of a jumbled up. So I can kind of see where he's coming from there. What he's angling towards is maybe Friday is practice and quali for the Sunday race, and then Saturday is its own complete standalone event. So you have quali for the sprint in the morning and you have the sprint in the afternoon. What do you think, Brian?
Nope. I mean, I'm not a fan. I'm with Max. Max came out and said, yeah, that's not for me. I won't be around for that. I like the setup time. I like the fact fans get to go watch on practice sessions where it's the little lower key, kind of check out what's going on, see the cars go around track. And if you remember, I mean, these cars are so technical. There's nothing wrong with giving people time to get them dialed in. On this here pokey little podcast, we had a fella on.
This is Valtteri Bottas.
And Valtteri basically said, the thing we don't appreciate as fans is the amount of multitasking that happens during the race, the amount of settings that they have to dial the car into all the time, continuously around every lap, the whole thing. I had friends over watching the race last night. I was trying to explain DRS. And when you really get down to it, the amount of time, the detection, the speed, the pace, what they have to do, the buttons, the brakes, the way it works, that's one feature. So you're telling me that they don't need the time to get dialed in? I'm all for a wet quali and a dry race, jumbles it up, I agree. But I'm also all for teams having time to get things right. And so
yeah, me too.
It's a fine line. I do not personally like this idea. I'm with Max 100%. It sounds a little silly to me.
I don't think the whole weekend needs to be a show. It's like you don't see, I'm going to go for my sport first of all, but you don't see in like English football, you don't see the pre-game warm-up when they're all kind of come out onto the field and they're warming up for 20 minutes before the match. That doesn't have to have some competition based on it.
Right.
The fastest team to warm up, we're going to get a bonus point. No, the players need to warm up before they're ready to perform.
Yes.
And that's exactly the same here, right? The whole team needs to dial in order to give us that show on quali and the race. So, yeah, I'm like, hands off, Stefano. If you're listening, like I know you do every week, then listen to the dirty side and don't do it. We should have probably tied this one back into the Mercedes talk, but it was interesting to see, like, are there, like, cracks appearing at the relationship with George and Lewis? And I thought this was maybe an out-of-context thing, but I went and found it, and it kind of really wasn't. So Lewis had claimed that George's setup was lucky in the last race, and he just got he just lucked in and got a better setup than Lewis did. And George kind of bit back and went, no, I had a lot of prep work that I put in. And then this is the little knife twister that I don't think he needs to add. And I knew my setup was going to be better than Lewis's anyway. It's like, ooh.
I mean, George thinks he's the number one driver there.
Yeah, I think he does. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, either.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. So,
right,
you like to nerd out on penalty points, don't you, Brian? So I'll let you do this bit.
I mean, math, that's great. So for anyone who's newer and may not know this, drivers can accrue penalty points throughout the season, and they take a year to come off your super license. And if you get to 12, you have to sit out the next race. Pierre Gasly of Alpine, formerly AlphaTauri, had 10 coming into this year. And so often penalty points come in 2. Depending on what you do, it's pretty common to get 2 penalty points for doing something. And as I said, 12 is the magic number. He'd be out for a race. And none of the points were set to come off his license until May, end of May. So he was in jeopardy and has been in jeopardy. If he makes a sporting error on the track, he could get a penalty and miss a race. So Alpine made a push to get some of these views of what is a penalty point and what isn't. And there are some small ones where you get 1 penalty point for minor things, but usually you end up getting a penalty on the track as well, like 5-second time penalty, and sometimes also assign a penalty point. And so Autosport had a great review of this conversation. And so going forward, there will be less sort of small, you might call it like ding-dong kind of penalties where you're back and forth with the driver and you do something, a small error, and you hit somebody sort of in the track conversation of the driving. And so what they said is, here's what will happen. We're going to do away with a lot of those single small points. And Alpine goes, well, great. Then you should take these off of Pierre's license, the ones that have accrued. And they said, no, it's just going forward, not retroactive. Sorry. Because all of these teams stood up and said, don't do that. So Pierre still sits on 10 penalty points, very close to 12, and he has a couple months. Now, thankfully, he's got a big China-shaped gap for the next month where there's no races. But when we come back, he'll have to be a pretty good boy for the next couple weeks. And in the end of the race tonight, I was yelling at the TV when he cut across Esteban and we had Alpine on Alpine crime. I'm like, oh, no, could this be his 2 points? Because I was thinking of that story. So anyway, just a note there. And Rob, it's time for Brian's video vault. But
yay, you see, if I keep making you say it, then you start calling it that as well. Yes.
I have an audio selection first, though. And, as we were kind of thinking about, there were a lot of Abu Dhabi parallels from 2021 in the race today. I don't know if we'll get into it because we try to avoid that topic as best we can. But there were a lot of parallels, the way the race ended, the way the conversation about the restart, and the way what's sort of fair and not. And Michael Massey was in the paddock, and it was lap 58. And so it was like all of this stuff, Twilight Zone. And it reminded me, our first ever episode was right after that race. And we started in a very similar fashion, but you didn't seem to like our start. So I just wanted to get your perspective on the way we'd started this podcast a little bit ago. Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast, with your hosts, Brian Saperstein and Rob Vale. What's going on, Rob?
Well, what's going on is this is going to be the shortest ever podcast career if you're going to introduce every single podcast like that. And
So, despite Rob's threat to make this the shortest run podcast ever, and the fact that we both sounded terrible, we've been doing it the same way effectively.
No,
since
we
then,
haven't.
If
If you listen to that, you now no longer sound like cheesy Saturday night game show host with the big intonations at the end of all the sentences. So you've kind of dialed it back a bit to a decent level of hey now, which I think everyone's grown to love. But that first one still makes me cringe.
Yeah,
just
me
listen
too.
to it there. It's not good, Brian. So you should have left that buried in the past, to be honest.
So
Why don't you get on with cracking open the video
vault?
I thought you'd actually got a sound effect ready for the video vault for once, but no, we had to listen to that again.
Yes. There's a documentary just came out, or it's called a documentary, came out today. Max Verstappen, Anatomy of a Champion. I really hope we're not going to actually figure out Max Verstappen's anatomy. I hope it's more about how he became a champion. It's on Viaplay. I did not know about this coming out, so I will keep my eyes peeled and try to figure out how to watch it. But I don't know. Did you see this coming, Rob? I had no clue.
I'd never even heard of it. I thought this was an April Fool you'd fallen for.
It might be. Half of it's in a language I don't understand, so, I mean, who really knows? But Netflix, before April 1st, announced a real piece of cinema, a 6-episode series called Senna. Obviously about Ayrton Senna. Gabriel Leon will play Senna, and it's coming to Netflix. I cannot wait.
No, I think that would be good. Well, we reserve judgment till we've seen it, because sometimes these things don't always hit the mark. But no, looking forward to that, and let's see what they bring.
Yep.
Hey, and I'm going to surprise you now, because out of the 1, 2, 3, 4 videos that you've got this week in the video vault, guess who's watched 3 of them?
Me?
Thumbs on this guy.
Well, then why don't you tell us about it? Tell me what
you lead out, and I'll add my colour. This is your section. It's your video vault.
George reacts to his F1 intro pose memes. So in the F1 intro, there's one point where you see George Russell, and he's got his arms out to the side. And I'm doing it on the Zoom here for Rob and I. And he's basically holding up the wall on each side. However, it obviously became a big meme opportunity, and they just go through 4 minutes of it on the Mercedes channel. It gets a bit old. It's funny for about a minute, maybe a minute and a half. And then
maybe 30 seconds.
Yeah, it gets old looking at these memes, and he's trying to prop it up and make it funny. It got older faster than Leo DiCaprio's girlfriends.
I love the way you screwed the punchline up. But I watched this and I thought, well, I'll see if Brian's been a bit harsh here. How to take something that the internet took to their hearts and were really, really funny with, select a subset that weren't really the best ones, and then have George try to talk them up about whether or not they could be a real pose he would strike. It was done after the first one.
And it was done after, you're right. And there was one part I just have to ask, because this next week's DRS guest, Darren, we had a little conversation after we recorded. He said, George did, I need to get a gun in a pocket, he means holster, right next to my blank logo on his race suit. Puma.
He said Puma.
Right. And you say?
I said the same as George, Puma.
Right, and it's Puma.
Well, potato, aluminium,
Adidas?
aluminum. I mean,
Adidas? No, okay. We got some real problems here.
Well, just play your intro again from the first episode. That's a problem.
Comparing F1 to Formula E with Nick DeVries behind the visor on the Alpha Tauri channel. 3 minutes. I like this one a lot. I thought this was really great. It showed Nick's perspective on why he's ready to be an F1 and how it's helped him become the driver he is. Also, in one of my bold picks, picked him to outpoint Yuki this season. But I thought this was a fun 3-minute video to kind of see Nick's perspective on his career and how it's helped build him into the F1 driver he is now. Did you see this one?
No, this is the one I didn't see, so I'll take your word for it. I'll watch it later.
Oh,
it didn't draw me in. You didn't sell it well.
Jeez Louise. All right, we'll hit the last two quick because these are pretty popular. F1 car versus Outback. Daniel Ricciardo's great Aussie road trip on the Red Bull channel. 9 minutes. It is fun. It's an older Red Bull car, just with supposedly Daniel, driving all over Australia, and some Red Bull Extreme Sports people. I think there's a cameo from Hannah Schmitz. I think you're right. Yeah,
I think you're right as well. When I saw you write that note, I was like, yeah, I think I saw her in there. I mean, this is a 100% advert for what Alan Jones was on about maybe Danny Rick loving life away from the track too much.
Yeah.
But also, I really got vibes of if Red Bull did Grand Tour.
Yes,
I loved it.
I
loved
didn't think
it.
of that.
It was 9 minutes, and it didn't seem to last 9 minutes. It's cheesy. It is cheesy, but it's good cheese.
When they started, did you notice he was in a tractor, like when they got him on the Zoom call? And did you notice the tractor was orange, or dare I say papaya colored? And then F1 drivers take on the 5-second challenge. This was on the F1 channel. This made the rounds. Most people probably have seen it. It's 4 minutes. It was fun. Check it out. There's no harm in watching it. It's not the greatest video they've done. It's not the worst. But they do ask Yuki to name states in the United States. And I recognize, as a U.S. podcast, we are obviously focused on the U.S., and we think we're the center of the world, and we're not. We get that. But Southern California was the name of one of his states, South California, and Chicago was a state. I like this. Yuki's my guy. Chicago's a state in the U.S. Sign me up.
Oh yeah, no, that was it was, like you say, harmless. It was not too long, and it was funny. Yuki was definitely the highlight of that one. Okay, before we get into race weekend, I just got to quickly close a circle while we're in news and social about like a weird little social circle that happened on Twitter last night, which went from me trying to embrace basketball via the medium of beer and ended up going full circle and coming back to the podcast, which I just found completely bizarre. So I posted a picture. I was trying to find Australian beer. We're trying to drink alcohol that goes along with the racetrack that we're watching races at. I couldn't find anything.
I did, but I had to go to Foster's, and I'm sorry, Mark.
I had an Australian Cabernet in the house, so kind of that was my drink. But while I was out, I saw there's a Connecticut brewery called Two Roads, and they've done a beer called Two Con to celebrate Yukon going all the way through in that. The bouncy ball thing that you like, right?
Yep.
And Yukon are pretty good, apparently, so I've really got aboard this train. Now that there's actually an official beer, I can get behind this. So I kind of got the beer, watched a bit of the game. I posted it on Twitter that I was drinking this beer, and I kind of tagged the brewery. They actually retweeted it. But then a bar not far from me, J. Timothy's, they make some great wings. And this isn't sponsored by J. Timothy's section, by the way. They
could be, though. Call us.
They could be, because their wings are called Dirty Wings, and that would be a really great coming together, wouldn't it? Dirty wings on the dirty side. Anyway, they responded to this thing, and they replied to me, and they were like, wow, didn't realise you were in Connecticut, which implies that they listened to the pod, maybe. And then their highlight was that recently they had Nate Saunders in the bar eating wings and discussing F1 at the bar. So kind of full circle. What started off as me trying to diversify my sports and get into basketball went full circle and came back to an F1 chat about Nate Saunders. So,
well, shout out to both the beer and the bar. And then we hit race week, and we get into Australia, and we get into practice, even if Stefano doesn't want us to have all this practice. We had FP1, FP2, and FP3, as we always do when it's not a sprint weekend. And FP1 was chaos. I don't know what happened. Like, there's a lot of reasons people were saying the track hadn't been rubbered in yet, and people were figuring this out. We had, first of all, we realized at this point Checo had a problem. Like, there was something wrong with Checo's car the whole weekend. And
did they put beeswax on his wheels or something before he went out?
I think Daniel Ricciardo had tried to poison Max a couple weeks ago with the food poisoning, and now he was out there screwing with the brakes on Checo's car, is my guess. And I'm stealing that from Connor Moore, so credit to Connor Moore's joke. But, like, Checo's in the gravel, K-Mag's in the gravel, it's a traffic paradise, Yuki's in the grass, he's hopping around in the grass. It was Sam Collins was trying to talk about the power unit for a second, and as he's doing this, we have Checo, Yuki, and K-Mag rolling through grass and gravel. He couldn't finish his story. Red flag for we couldn't figure out what GPS issues. They couldn't figure out where the cars were. Well, what is happening?
And my neighbour Jim has always asked, like, what do they use to pinpoint exactly where the cars are on the track down to kind of like the thousandth of a second? And we're like, I'm not quite sure. We'll look into it one day. And we've forgotten. And then the gift of this answered it for us. It's GPS. And apparently when it goes wrong, it's really bad because they didn't know where the other cars were. We had situations where cars on cooldown laps that were going slowly couldn't be told if there was someone flying up their trumpet, to use Brian's phrase, because they didn't know because the GPS had gone down. So that does, I mean, obviously they used to live without that a long time ago, but obviously they rely on it big time now. And with that out of action, then they really had to
shut it down. Max had a big session off. Max had a big spin. Logan's car had some electrical gremlins. FP2, rain kind of messed up the whole running. No Sargent anyway. FP3, just again, a little bit of chaos. Checo nearly hit Hulkenberg. They were both running hard. This was very confusing to me. And the commentator said Hulk might have been on a high fuel lap and wasn't able to go as fast as Checo. But Checo, they were both flying, and they almost hit each other. We had Stroll just tootling around in the middle of the track as George was coming by. It's like he learned nothing from the U.S. last year. K-Mag went off again. Kevin's not having a great start to the season. The dirty air talk is back. Are the cars not able to follow as close as last year? Have teams figured out a way to funnel some air behind them as opposed to up as sort of a defensive mechanism? We had a spin from Joe. It was just chaos in FP3, and Checo went off 4 times.
It's okay because he'll probably learn from that and get it all sorted at the beginning of quali, right?
4 times. I'm like, I have to think they were doing surgery on that car the whole weekend.
Missed my joke there. That was your segue into talking about quali and what Checo did.
Yeah, I know. He goes off right in the beginning, Q1. Start it up. I wanted to finish the fact that Carlos went into the gravel on the cooldown lap. That was important to me because he visited the gravel there last year. But anyway, quali, right? So Checo goes off right away, right into the beginning of Q1.
Done.
Yeah, I'll start 20th. That's fine. No problem. It's like he won last week, and they got Horner and Jos Verstappen and Ricardo in there fooling with his rear roll bar and his brakes. That was nuts.
Yeah, and everyone came out really early. It felt like it was a weird quali session because normally people come out, do their first stint, go back in, have a little rest, look at the telemetry, get told where they're losing time, go back out for second run. We're done. We move on to Q2. It was like, this time they kind of went, well, let's all go now. Just all of us. And we had traffic chaos again. It was pretty intense. Obviously, we knew Checo's out because he's out. Who else do we drop in that Q1 there?
Alfa Romeos both went out, Valtteri and Joe. We lost Logan and Oscar. Also out. But
Oscar
Albon
just missed as well, didn't he?
He just missed at home.
It was only like a couple of... It wasn't even measured in tenths, I don't think, how close he was.
We also saw Albon in the middle sector. Mr. Purple. He could not be stopped until he stopped himself in the race. He's still getting purples in the quali middle sectors. That was intense. Really nice job from him and Williams.
It was, but he was getting yellows in 1 and 3. Yeah. So there was a meme going around that they were saying Albon's lap, and they were showing like gravel mud traps of and there with a label that said Q1, then perfectly smooth asphalt for sector 2, and then back to the mud trap for sector 3 because he can hook it up for one sector and then puts the brake on for the rest of the lap.
It was like a 19-second sector or something. So anyway. Then we go to Q2. Tons of running again. Just fun to watch. Hulk and Albon again just hooking it up. We lose Esteban. Now we lose both AlphaTauris, Lando, and K-Mag. But, it was just, again, it was fun. I liked it. Was a lot of cars going, battling for the last few spots to get into Q3. Alex, Esteban, Pierre, and Lando really fighting for those spots. Lando obviously didn't make it with Esteban. But so we go to Q3, and normal service is resumed. Max is at the top.
I wouldn't say normal service.
I think the Mercedes was the story you're going to talk about.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was the one thing, and it was at the end. It was at the end of quali, Q3. Mercedes posts 2 scores times right below Max. That was a little bit of a surprise, but like I said when we started, maybe the car's not as bad as they thought, or wanted us to believe,
No. They decided to hose their first 2 races just to lull everybody into a false sense of security.
Are they back at the factory designing a brand new car for this year?
Yeah, basically they're doing that second concept, aren't they? So I think this was a track that just they always say that the Mercedes suffers with the tires, and this one it suffers almost no tire deg on this one. That's why everyone was kind of saying it's just everyone's going to do the same tire strategy pretty much. It might change the order you run it, but you're basically going to do one run on softs or mediums, and then you're going to lob hards on and go to the end of the race. It's like one stop was just, unless you get, and we'll talk safety cars, but unless that happens, that's it. There's real no variety here because the tyre degradation is so low, and I think that really helps Mercedes out because I think they've struggled with that this season and last season as well.
You remember last year, Albon went the whole race on one set of tires and had to pit on the final lap to get a switch of compound, and there were people in the pit lane. I mean, that was insane. And you know what? Those people last year, those VIPs, they weren't on the fence, though, so it was okay.
It was okay, yeah, exactly. So then we come to the actual start of the race, and it's 1 a.m. for me, and I'm just thinking, let's have a good start. Let's not have Max just disappear into the distance and go into witness protection right from the get-go. And George made sure that didn't happen. Oh, George, have you got the sound effect for the start? Come on, Brian. Come on, Brian. It's your moment. Oh, dear. George! That's what I was screaming as he went down into the first corner.
That was impressive.
It was a good start. Max bogged down a little bit.
Max had a couple bad starts.
He did. So, great start. And then as I'm still on the high of thinking, go, George, go, I'm looking in the background and I'm seeing a red car go into the gravel and just your heart sinks.
Backwards.
And
then Charles does what Charles likes to do in the gravel, floor it. Like,
just
bro,
dig in.
All you're doing is just digging in. Like, can they do because Carlos has done this too, can they do a gravel school? Can K-Mag come teach him gravel driving? Because he's pulled out more gravel traps. And did you see him? Like, he immediately just hits the gas and you watch the rear go just right into the gravel. Like, you're done.
And gravel's going to play quite a story in the race as we go. So it was safety car then. Now, I think it probably was safety car because where he ended up beaching. But lots of people came in and made their little changes. If people had started on whatever, they went for the hards quite early, which meant that people are really going to be now needing to take these to the end. Right. I was worried at that point that they've all gone to hards too early and we're just going to get a race of everyone nursing their tyres all the way to the end and get nothing. But that didn't quite happen. So George, it was a clean restart. I thought that maybe... when you see them back the pack up a little bit, when's he going to go?
Right.
George just decided to go with, I'm gone. He went so early. It was like normally they get bunched up in that little S-bend towards the start-finish straight. And as they came around that first one, he was like, Roadrunner, he's out of here. Which probably worked in his favour, I think. I think he caught a few of them napping there.
It did, and we didn't mention this, but Lewis had also passed Max before the time of the safety car. So we had George, Lewis, Max, and the question then became after the restart, how long till Max can catch Lewis? And you're kind of waiting for it to happen. DRS is just getting enabled, and then all of a sudden, just a weird crash where Alex loses the back of the Williams, goes into the gravel, bounces off the wall, and very scarily from the Hulkenberg onboard, it's a cloud of dust, of the gravel dust, and the Williams is rolling backwards onto a live fire track. And Hulkenberg's onboard, he goes by not far away at full chat. And he
shut his eyes and just hoped for the best there, didn't he?
Super close. I mean, I watched it. I'm like, oh, boy.
But the funny thing is, we didn't know any of that had happened, right? Because I was watching it with my son. My son had got up as well. And all of a sudden, you saw on the timing board on the left-hand side, Albon just started going dunk, 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 falling all the way down the pecking order. I'm like, Albon's out. And that's all we kind of knew. And then we saw it. We saw the replay. It's like, right, it's going to have to be a safety car because of where it is. A lot of nick debris all over the track. And it made sense. Safety car.
It did. And this is where it gets so silly. This is part of the beginning of the chaos that really, for me, made the race less enjoyable. George comes into pit from the lead, gives up track position, and says, all right, I'm going to get a cheap pit stop out of the safety car, and now I definitely should be able to make it to the end of the race. It's like lap 7 or 8, and there's 58 laps. I got 50 laps on some hards. I'll be good. He comes in and pits, and as soon as he pulls out of the pits, at this point, we've been under safety car for what felt like a lap or two. And then they go, you know what? Hold on a second. We're going to go red flag here. And now everybody who didn't pit has amazing track position and can get a free pit stop in the pit lane, which is, I have a problem with that rule. I know you really do. So I'll let you take it. But
no, there's two sides to this coin that I don't like. And okay, so we'll hit the easy one first. I hate the rule. I want them to change this rule that you can't do any work on the car unless, I'll give a little proviso because this is the one that people always hit you with, unless there is something dangerous on the car that it can't be released back into the race. So if you happen to have picked up a puncture as part of the thing that's causing it to be red flagged and you're limping around with your rear right flapping around and it's about to delaminate and go everywhere, I got no problem with them being able to do that. And I know that people will say, well, that's not fair, or if you've got front wing hanging off, I think you should be able to repair a car if it's unsafe to release. But this whole free pit stop thing on a red flag just needs to change. I don't like it at all. But the other piece I probably don't like more is what leads to this in the first place is, like you said, there's too long a gap. The FIA have got to get their act together, and I think Toto was saying this afterwards as well. It's like we're all fine with the fact that there are four main mechanisms, right, to control this in order to make sure that the safety of the cars still on the track is maintained. One is the double waved yellow. It gets worse than that, you get the VSC. It gets worse than that, you get the safety car. It gets worse than that, you get the red flag. And there needs to be some, like, clear decision as to when each one is going to drop. Because here, and a lot of them said it, I think Max said it in the interview afterwards, they drove through the gravel a couple of times, and it wasn't that bad. And the car was off on the side, and they had the ability to go through. So go behind safety car. That's what it's for. Let them push the car off, get the brooms out, sweep up the gravel. Right. Jobs are good, and on we go again. I think the moment they decided they needed, and maybe this is the bit that there's like some inner decision making that we're not privy to, and if we're not, we should be, because then maybe as fans we'd understand it, is if they decided that there was a lot of carbon fibre and the only way to get rid of that is to bring that sweepy uppy truck thing, then none of us want the repeat of the Japan thing where we've got like heavy machinery on track and cars still going by. So if they knew that they needed to go and send out the Hoover on wheels, then red flag it straight away before half the grid go and screw their race strategy up. It's just...
I'm with you on both accounts. Last season it felt like we had a situation where we had a lot of VSCs that turned into full safety cars, where they'd go under VSC for a bit, and then they'd go full safety car. This season, only the third race, we had 3 red flags. This is the first race ever to feature 3 red flags.
I know.
And I don't think we needed it for 2 of them.
I agree. And they... Maybe to be fairer to the teams, if it is a big shunt like that and they're not sure, maybe they have the ability to throw a safety car down with a, in the same way that a lot of sports are using video review at the moment to decide if an on-field infringement happened, then maybe they need to say, right, safety car with red flag pending. Like, let them know that you're looking into the possibility of a red flag, because then George doesn't pit under that. If there's a worry this is going to red flag, he doesn't do it. If it goes full safety car and they've looked at the situation and said, this is just going to be a safety car, guys, then at least you know. You can make your strategy based on what's going on.
Or safety car, pit lane closed for the first lap unless, safety's at risk. So you can't come in for a pit stop until they determine the long-term approach and go, we're going safety car for a handful of laps. We don't know how many. Now we open the pits, and there's no detriment to someone pitting quick, and everyone would have a chance, if they wanted, to give up track position. No, I agree.
Yeah.
So
then at this point, just before the restart, because these, while I was in my rage of anger, because it was 1 a.m. or whatever time it was, so it didn't take much to tip me over the edge. But at least I giggled because, as well as the Sky Red button, and no one's got a clue in the US what on earth the Sky Red button is, they also made a Mystic Meg. They said that George, didn't have the benefit of having Mystic Meg with him, which I was like, no one is going to know who Mystic Meg is. Do you know who Mystic Meg is?
It's Meg, and she's a mystic.
So back in the day when they first launched the National Lottery in the UK, and we all used to go buy our tickets and think we're going to be millionaires, they used to have this woman on the show called Mystic Meg beforehand who would help predict what numbers were going to come up.
Man, you are a strange lot.
Yeah. Guess what? She wasn't very good. I never want to...
Was there a
but anyway,
number you could call to pay to get her picks?
Like, it's not even a current reference. It's like properly 20 years old reference. But there we are.
So then we get the restart. Lewis is in front now because George lost track position. And Lewis was giving... And remember now, we're leaving the pits to get back to a standing start. So we got to do 1 lap to get back around to the grid boxes behind the safety car. And Lewis was giving the safety car something in the order of 20 to 30 car lengths. And the rule is 10.
No, you didn't listen to the commentary then. You must have fallen asleep.
What?
They actually went into... One of them, Ted or somebody, went into the rule book and said, Lewis has got this wrong and Max has got... Lewis has got this right and Max has got this wrong.
Really? I did
when
not
it's
know
a
this.
roll, when it's treated like a formation lap,
okay.
and the baton gets handed back to Lewis to pace it.
Okay. Well, then he didn't do anything wrong except the concertina effect of slowing down, and all of the cars backed up on track. And it looked, and I didn't see it. Obviously, none of us saw this live. We saw the replay. And there were about 4 or 5 cars not moving as they were so backed up behind Lewis's slowdown behind the safety car, which apparently is legal. And so as they did this, it got scary because a couple cars, I think one might have been DeVries, came up and had to go around. But then it was K-Mag, who came in at about 100 miles an hour and had to bail to the left on the gravel past 7 cars under the safety car.
On the gravel, they just spent all that time putting
cleaning
back.
Right, same corner. And it reminded me of, was it Mugello in 2020 when they had backed it up and Grosjean got so angry, and it was a similar thing. I think it was Valtteri, backed it up. and they all were like thought they had gone green, and they took off, and there were cars not moving, and it was a massive crash. I'm pretty sure it was Mugello. I could be wrong, but so that had, like, in my mind, like, oh my God, we just dodged a massive situation there. And but K-Mag went through, seriously, 10 times, 20 times faster than any other moving car. It was crazy.
That replay was insane. There's going to have to be some. I'm sure they're going to have to look at that to see what on earth happened. But yeah, but the restart was pretty good. Fernando suddenly looked like racy. Like all of a sudden we were coming into a zone where he was going to absolutely go for it. But then I think that was an adrenaline rush, because I think then the little kind of word in his ear kind of went, these tyres need to last until the end, and he kind of dropped back a little bit. And really all the action was going on behind. We had lots of people getting racy further on down the grid. Sainz got Lando. Oh, excuse me. You look like you were about to say something, Brian.
Yeah. So Nick, sorry, I was waiting for you to stop. Nick gets tossed into the air from Esteban. They kind of made contact, and Nick goes off into the grass and is bouncing around like crazy. I got to just say one thing as a precursor to the end of the race. When the race started and Charles went out into the gravel, he was tapped by Lance. Lance got no penalty for that. It was deemed sort of by everybody, the commentators, it was a racing incident on lap 1, right? As the start of the race, racing incident. This, again, lap 1 start. I know it's lap whatever of the restart, but the restart, standing start, no penalty for Esteban. Everyone kind of agreed he had nowhere else to go. It was kind of like they came together. It was a racing incident to get started, and pushed Nick out into the grass. That'll come back later in terms of a standing start situation and someone finally getting penalized, I thought unfairly, but we'll get there in a minute. And so then the race starts, as you said. Lewis is out front, Max is behind him, DRS opens. I think you wrote, this will be easy, game over, and then it was. Why did they have a fourth zone? I know we wrestled with it last year, and then this year they added it and trialed it and kept it. It made it too easy for certain cars, no?
Yeah, it really did, and the commentators hit the nail on the head. Once Max had gone and we knew that was done and dusted, unless he actually had a mechanical issue or whatever, then it was going to be his win. So we got to concentrate on the rest of the grid, where there were loads of overtakes, but because everybody was fairly close together, we actually got a DRS train, but not a bad DRS train. We got a train where DRS was negated, and we got some proper moves, and we got a lot of them. Now, a lot of them were Checo coming through the field, but... We had Sainz put a great move on Stroll. Checo starts moving up, and he hit it was like dominoes. He took K-Mag, he took Zhou. At this point, Alonso starts climbing into Lewis's DRS window as well, and it was all kind of starting to look good. And we had lots of battles all the way through. Well, I say all the way through, probably to about 12th, 13th, and then there was like a bit of a delta to the people running around the back, which unfortunately was Bottas.
I know.
Which Paul will talk about later in his review as to why he got screwed. And then George was on fire, and not in a good way.
Yeah, this also requires this. That was a proper fire. At first, it didn't look that big, and then as he pulls up kind of level with the camera and is slowing down, a massive fireball just comes out the back of that Mercedes. Now, I think this might qualify for an external combustion engine from JP, because that's what it sure looked like. That was not good.
Yeah, I mean, there was not enough melting going on like the Ferrari, so I'm not sure it'd be full-on external combustion engine, but I think you're right. But for this one, because George was able to kind of park it fairly sensibly at the end of the pit lane, they just closed the pit lane, VSC, rolled it backwards and in, and put the fire out, and on we went.
I'm surprised we didn't get a red flag for that.
Well, I was just about to say that. That was it was kind of like the extremes of decision-making that we had today, and that one... I've got to be honest, when we get to the red flags later, I do agree with a lot of them, but it was just... we'll get there. We'll get to the carnage. So we got Checo. He gets Ocon. Again, these are great overtakes. A lot of these are not DRS-inspired overtakes. Right. They're just good old-fashioned racing.
On the same corner in 2 laps. Yeah. He went under one guy and around to the other.
Corner 11?
I think so. It was great. Checo was moving. It was fun to watch. Like we said, we had... Then he took Tsunoda, Sainz going after the gas man. The last spot, we had Tsunoda, Piastri, Ocon going after each other, and it was racing back and forth. So they'd take them, and then Ocon would take Esteban, and then got Yuki, but then they'd fight back. Yuki was in 11th. Last year, if anyone remembers, Lando kept finishing 7th. He had this weird thing. He always finished 7th, and he was 7th in the Constructors, 7th, 7th, 7th. Yuki is dialing into this 11th situation. We'll talk more about that in a second. But it would have been his third or fourth 11th in a row, third of the season. I can't remember if there was one.
Third in a row, yeah, third in a row. They said. Yeah, and just before we get to kind of Yuki's 11th, I did like. I think I heard this as commentary, and if not, we're going to say it happened anyway. But Sainz got the gas man after being in his DRS window for what felt like 3 or 4 laps. He just couldn't quite get him. He put a move up the inside,
yes,
which I think they said that was a stick it or bin it move, which is. It was so good, but he came in so hot that literally, if he hadn't quite been able to brake hard enough to make the corner, he was done. That was like hero or zero moment.
I think it was the same corner where Lewis took Max to on lap 2 of the race. And actually, I'd like to make a comment on both because we didn't really get into either of those. But the Carlos move and the Lewis move, I thought were both fine. I know Max said he got pushed off. I don't think it was aggressive, but I thought it was fair on both of them, personally.
Yeah, I mean, nothing worse than, Max has made a career out of doing some aggressive overtakes. And again, nothing against Max. That's where you are. At the limit of competition, Max has put some phenomenal moves on people, but they've been elbows out. And that was just the elbower became the elbowee, I think, on the Lewis one. And that's when we had Crofty came on and said that the most consecutive finishes in a position other than first will be Yuki if he finishes third this race, and he'll set a record. And I was like, someone's been really trawling the record books to find that. But, then Alonso just started falling back a little bit. The big, Alonso Hamilton ding dong that we were all looking forward to. You just knew that we were going into tyre management game. Alonso's too long in the tooth to be chasing Lewis down just because it's Lewis. So he kind of fell back a little bit. Yeah, and I wrote here that the Hulk was in the witness protection program because we hadn't seen him. He was doing great. He was up in 7th. I don't think we saw him once.
He had a great quali and had a great race. And for a millisecond, it looked like he might have a podium. But we'll get to that towards the end. Didn't see him. We got into a little bit of tire management. There were some DRS trains forming occasionally that were not the most exciting to watch. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't like the greatest racing action. It would be what I would call the lull.
And that's exactly what I wrote. I think I wrote in the notes, I'm going to call it for you, Brian. It was the mid-race lull where we were just managing tyres. It started about lap 33 and really not a lot happens. Kind of let's just keep fast forwarding because not a lot really happened until about another sort of 5, 6, 7 laps maybe. Checo was kind of... The Checo excitement had died down at this point because he'd already overtaken anybody that was in striking distance, and once the next car in front of him was Lando, he had something like about 7 seconds or something to catch up. So that almost didn't help the lull either, because while everyone else's tyre management mode, Checo was just eating in. He finally caught up with him around 42, 43, and that was a nice little series of battles between the two of them. I thought Lando did really well to keep him behind for that amount of time.
Amazing. I thought he did a great job as well. Checo sat there in his DRS, gets him, and then gets right up on Hulk. Gets him into, I think it was 7th position, and then Hulk pulls the Alonso move from Saudi Arabia, which is I'm going to grab onto your tail, hold onto this DRS, and let you drag me around to protect from the guys behind me, which was a great move.
Yeah, I mean, it really was.
Hulkenberg is driving, I think, really well so far this year.
I think he is. I think, as much as I was a big Mick fan, Hulk's not put a foot wrong so far, really. Talking of putting a foot wrong, maybe he put his foot down too hard, don't know. But Max had a lock-up and we had a little moment where all of a sudden it was like I saw the delta on the left-hand side of the screen kind of fall rapidly. I thought, oh, he's got trouble. And again, not wishing trouble on Max, but it just would have spiced it up a little bit if something had happened. But he just locked up and went for a little cruise across the grass.
Yeah. He was up about 11, give or take, seconds on second place at this point, and I think I'd predicted in our F1 crap he'd win by 20 seconds, so I needed him to pick the pace up a little bit to get to 20, and then when he rolled back, he lost about 4 or 5 seconds, was at 7 seconds at this point on Lewis, and I'm like, it
got down to something like 5.9 or 6, I think.
Yeah.
He
so I'm like, come on, Max,
lead,
you gotta, and then Piastri was making his way into the points. We'll talk in a second about, him getting kind of close there. Before the chaos at the end. And I was thinking I had a chance at getting some F1 crap right. And of course I didn't. But so like you said, we saw Max had a lockup. Then Lando gets onto Hulk, and some great moves back and forth. And then as Hulkenberg and Lando are battling, Lando kind of gets past him. Hulk has to go off the track a little, gets a little bit of the tail towards the gravel, slides through, and holds it. It was kind of like a off-roading thing, and he gets right back onto the track, and he's obviously lost the position and needs to start fighting his way back. But I loved it. I'm sitting here literally yelling at my TV. I mean, I thought that was great, and no one knew what I was doing.
It was like a power slide. It was like a Mario Kart power slide. It was almost like he was saying to everyone else that had visited the gravel today, "This is how you do it, boys." And he just kind of stuck it and went through. Then we had what I still don't understand, and I've watched the replay multiple times, and the commentary team maybe blamed it on the low sun or whatever it is, but K-Mag has a moment where he just thinks the track is about a foot wider than it is, and just drifts over. He doesn't lose it beforehand. There seems to be nothing that goes wrong, and he just, I guess the thing is he kisses the wall with his rear tire.
And it wasn't particularly hard. If you remember 2 years ago, Max in Saudi Arabia on the inaugural race there, was it 2 years ago or was it last year? He had a quali lap that would have put him up top, and he came around the last corner of Jeddah, and he tapped the wall with his rear wheel, and that was it. But he continued on. He lost the time, and he was done. K-Mag taps the wall with his wheel, and all hell breaks loose. The tire rips off. What? And so we got a tire bouncing around. His car is a disaster. He's flying all over the place. There's bits and bobs and bolts of Haas' car all over the track. And so this starts as a safety car, and then it also goes to the red flag. I understood a little more of this one being a red flag. There was a little more debris, but I still think this could have been a safety car.
Yeah, now this is where my little bit of sympathy for the FIA comes in, which is Monza last year.
Yes.
Oh, we can't finish under a safety car. This is boring.
I've always said you can.
And everyone said, no, the rule was right, but everyone said, when it's like that, what's the harm with throwing the red flag and just finishing under racing? And there was genuine kind of consensus of, well, they couldn't have done it today because that's not the rules. And I believe, and I haven't read up enough on this, and I thought there was some kind of general meeting of all kind of the team principals where they have got behind this idea of, if possible, let's finish under racing conditions. So, okay, so they red flagged it. And we're now going to have this 2-lap shootout. It's
so exciting.
3 laps left. Now, by the way, you might not know the answer to this. Maybe we should ask Pit Lane Paul or somebody could let us know. But why does a formation lap not count towards race distance, but a formation lap for a restart does? It would have been better just to have a 3-lap shootout here rather than 2, but the one to the grid counts, but the one to the grid at the start of the race doesn't.
I think it's because once the race starts, every time you go around, it counts.
Yeah, but now it's red flagged, so the race is stopped.
So but when you leave the pits, you're behind the safety car.
Anyway,
on the first formation lap, there's no safety car. Like when you get to the grid boxes and then you go around.
True. Maybe it's something to do with that, but I don't get it.
I'm guessing that's the difference. But anyway, we red flag it. 2-lap shootout to the end. It is just insanity as we're sitting here watching the opportunity. Max and this. I have a perspective from a buddy, which I got to bring in because it's a good one. He looks at me and he says, "Let me understand this. Max has dominated for 56 laps." Dominated, built up a 6-7 second lead, even with his little lawn mowing situation. That is now completely erased. Everyone gets fresh tires to do whatever they like, and they start over a standing start, and now we're going to do a 2-lap race instead of a 58-lap race. He's like, isn't that the equivalent of effectively having a football game? In the fourth quarter, the Bears are beating the Packers by 25 points, and then with 2 minutes left at the 2-minute warning, penalty, and they start the whole game over again, 0-0. We're going to play 2 minutes of the game, and whomever wins from this point is the winner of the game. That's not a bad analogy. I'm just so used to it as an F1 fan. For a non-F1 fan, why would you neutralize the entire race?
Oh, because how lame would it be if you had to restart after a red flag and you have to get Max go and start a clock and wait for it to get to 7 seconds and then let the next one out of the pit lane? I mean, that would be pathetic. It's just part of motorsport. Deal with it.
And so then we get the restart, and it was chaos. Did you actually go to bed at this point?
No. I went to bed before the Carlo penalty got announced. I was just done because I had to get up for my football match like 3 hours later. Anyway, my son was sitting there waiting for the restart, and he's like, this is going to be a mess, isn't it? Because like everybody sniffs blood now. Everybody has the opportunity to make hay while the sun shines now. You've got 2 laps to try and maximise your finishing position. What are the chances of them making it through the first corner? And I looked at him and I said, it's pretty low to 0. And so it transpired.
Just insanity. I mean, everybody and their mom was in an accident. It was just chaos. The cars were going off left and right. I mean, the Alpines, just insane.
Poor Otmar.
Poor Otmar. He must have been sitting there going, what did I do to deserve this?
So it just says, to set the context, the lights go out, everyone shoots away, they hit the first corner, pretty much the whole world collides. We lose 6 or 7 cars in this first
hits
corner.
Fernando.
Carlo hits Fernando and sends Fernando spinning, but he's not out. He recovers, but far back. We lose 6 or 7 cars, which includes both the Alpines, and then we red flag it. And then this is where now we get into the ridiculousness of the FIA or whoever it is, race directors, whatever, taking a ridiculous amount of time, and maybe it felt longer because it was 3:30 a.m. and I wanted to go to bed, but they didn't really seem to be able to work out very quickly whether or not the cars had made it through the relevant sector to be able to count the positions, or whether they had to do a count back to the restart. Now let's wind back to what we said right at the beginning of why free practice 1 got red flagged. Because the GPS went down. Because when the GPS is active, they know exactly where everybody is. So surely it's about a 10-second job to review the restart and the GPS telemetry and go, did they make it through Sector 1? Can we count the times? No? Cool. Wind back to last known position, because that's the rule. It seemed to take forever for them to arrive at that.
It was wild, and it did take forever, and it should be pretty obvious. Either we go back to the position at the last restart and we run, or the way that we're aligned now as we pulled into the pits for the red flag is the new position, if we'd gone far enough along.
If we'd gone far enough, yeah.
And they decided after, you're right, it took forever. It was at least, 4 or 5 hours. I think the F1 fantasy game had enough time to update by then. They said, no, we're going to roll back, and that'll be the position we go in. But a lot of the drivers no longer had cars that worked, so they couldn't compete. And so now we have all of these cars DNFing, because we're going to get 1 lap to finish this race under safety car, which we'd been trying to avoid. And so we get a 1 lap procession under safety car. And here's my beef. I did not like the Carlos penalty. I know I'm a Carlos fan. I know I'm unabashed in my appreciation for him. But when they said you have a 5-second penalty and you're going to be under safety car, everybody can be within 5 seconds of him as they cross the line.
Yeah.
So I heard this.
Stop inventing. Stop inventing.
They should have stopped inventing. He did the same thing. FIA, I know you're not listening, but he did the same thing that Lance did to Charles on lap 1. As after the start, he did the same thing that Esteban did to Nick after one of the restarts. He did the same thing that we've seen over and over again. I don't think it was that egregious. I know it was on everybody's favorite Fernando Alonso this year, and they gave him a 5-second penalty and completely ruined his race. They might as well have just said, you have to finish on 2 tires, pick the ones you want to try to balance on the corners, and good luck, go for it.
But the thing that really kind of pickled my brain as well is like, right, so we're going to pretend that restart didn't happen.
Right.
Because we're going to wind everything back as if it didn't happen. However, we're going to... And so, Fernando, although you got spun around and lost all those positions, don't worry. Magic wand, abracadabra, you're back in where you were. Fantastic. So everyone's, okay, cool. Yeah, but Sainz, because you did that and you could have messed it up, you got a 5-second penalty for something that didn't happen.
The lap counts, too.
You unwind you unwind everyone's positions and put them back where they were, on one hand, but you are going to deal out a penalty, and then you are going to unwind all the positions, apart from the people that are poor, the poor people that have lost their cars, and they can't. That whole thing just feels a little bit of a mess.
I told you, Massey was in the paddock.
It just doesn't kind of sit right with this whole. You either wipe it all out and go back to the restart as if it didn't happen,
right?
Or you take the position that everyone's in, and then I would have been okay if Carlo. Okay,
right.
I still don't think he deserved the penalty because the others didn't get a penalty for exactly the same thing. However, I can kind of appreciate that if you're going to say that all of that stuff did come to pass, and there's any penalties to be served,
and then we argue whether or not it's a penalty, but it should be applied. You can't argue whether or not it's a penalty and then say it will be applied, even though the rest of the lap never existed.
But I mean, we're just 2 bozos sitting on a stool. I mean, we don't really know one thing from the other, but I mean, somebody that probably would would be our roving reporter, Pit Lane Paul. He couldn't get any alcohol last time out. I don't know if you noticed, it was a hidden message. I'm pretty sure he was able to get some in Australia. So let's check in with Pit Lane Paul and see what he felt about the whole thing.
Well, just back at the hotel, literally on my bed, and I have to try and summarise that place, Australia. That's it. This big place down here, where everything wants to kill you, including the FIA, seemingly. I won't lie, it's been a bit of a hectic week from my side. We've decided to sport mullets. We are full rocking a V. Well, you've probably seen on the guys' socials. It's been entertaining, hectic, busy, crazy. It's been everything. And anything that was really boring was still more interesting than the Friday session, so we're not going to touch on those. We all know my feelings on those. They're similar to France. Saturday qualifying, not really. Okay, yeah, it happened. It's okay, you know. And then we come to the race, and the truth be told, the race is it's always boring. Start on mediums, change to hards, drive to the end of the race because the tyre wear's that low. So all things considered, nothing else really exciting happened during the race. And that was about it. So anyway, that's that review done. Thank you very much. Onwards to Azerbaijan. Actually, no, not really. That's not especially true. The race itself, let's be honest. First lap, what do we have? We had the incident with Leclerc, which brought out, whatever it was. Might not even been the first lap. This is how much of a blur the last couple of hours in my life has been. But we had a safety car. That sort of scuppered our little chances with Valtteri, because we were going to try some clever little strategy of just driving around on hard tyres as long as we can. That brought out the red flag. Oh no, it wasn't Leclerc, was it? It was Albon, yeah. See? Told you. And so on and so forth. Anyway, we'll skip all that. That's life. Blah, 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 blah. And then we get to the end of the race. And it looked like it was just going to filter into being an end. You know, Lewis was under a little bit of pressure. Great to see Mercedes back, by the way. That's fantastic. Max drove away like you think he would do. And then apart from that, it was sort of like a bit of a, okay, it was, whatever, decentish sort of race. It wasn't bad. It wasn't world class. And then we had, I can't swear, but I'm going to say something that rhymes with hit, as if you got a bit of a speech impediment, showed by the FIA again. And the reason I say that is that's quite unfair. They didn't actually do anything wrong. The rules were the rules, and the rules are pretty black and white in that scenario. But it was such a mess after the incident with Magnussen and the restart, which then saw most of the field get caught up in an incident. I'm going to look at this two ways. I'm going to look at it first of all from our side, and that's for Valtteri and the team. Whereas, in my opinion, if a car's gone off the track to that's been involved in an accident, so on and so forth, it shouldn't matter when you've crossed the line. That Valtteri, at the time when the red flag is called, is in front. And as for the other cars that were there, so I'm never a massive fan of this. Then, well, we need to go back to what the race was at this point. The other side is there's no real proper good way as such of telling where the cars are, which is again slightly lies because the data we got nowadays with GPS and so on and so forth is actually quite simple to say where the cars are. And then we had the incident with Carlos Sainz. Now I'm gonna sit on the fence here. I thought that was a very, very harsh penalty. I understand why they gave it, obviously, but I think it's a very harsh penalty. Which obviously that triggered a bigger thing. I think the FIA reacted to the fact it was a bigger thing. And then we had this period of carnage in the paddock, whereas people were cheering around when, like, oh yeah, we're in this position, and like, well, no, we're not. And then I was savvy to some radio chat where even like the team cannot figure out where the cars are and what position they should be in. So Did it ruin a good race? I'm going to say yes. I think just the lack of clarity, and I think it's something that needs to be fixed. I think the lack of clarity is bad about, like, no one really knew. I obviously wasn't listening to TV, but what I understand is even on TV, they didn't really know what was happening. And I think really, considering the race has gone for 57 laps at that point or whatever it was, I think that's pretty poor to finish a race in that scenario. And then obviously with Carlos, sadly, he's not put a foot wrong all racing, up until the instant. Say what you like about it, and then he loses everything. So, and then you have cars that finish in front of, like us, for instance, with Valtteri, who were like in gravel traps and so on and so forth, with debris hanging off them. So, yeah, we feel a bit sick about it, but we appreciate the rules are rules. We're not going to moan about that. It's been a fun week. But again, it just feels to me like it's an FIA. FIA is going to be all over the paper, the discussion about so on and so forth. So I'm sort of getting a little bit bored of these guys stealing the limelight, innocently, I'll say. But yeah, I think sadly it's another race that we'll look at. And I'm sure you guys have been through this and spoke through this and come up with all your conclusions and theories. I am going to say it's currently 7:55 here in Melbourne at night. Obviously, just got back to the hotel, as I said. Will there be any position changes later on due to whatever? I've got no idea. There was an incident, I think it was the restart after Albon's crash, where on the lap to the grid, there were cars flying off everywhere. I'm amazed there hasn't been any sort of punishment for that, whether there will be or by the time you guys have recorded in. And I think, again, I'm going to hit the nail on the head. We still don't really know what the hell that Grand Prix was. All I do know is I go home. We got a few weeks till Azerbaijan. I'm quite sure there'll be a lot of chat in between now and then about this race, which is sad because, we seem to always be talking about the same things, but such is life. I haven't really even got the time and the energy to go through any facts about Australia. I sort of covered it a lot last year. It's big. It's got kangaroos. As I've said, everything here wants to eat you. If you go swimming, you're going to get your head ripped off by a shark. If you go for a walk, a snake's going to kill you. And if you go and sit down in the dunny, a spider's going to bite your arse cheek, and that's you going to be gone as well. So all in all, yep, I'm a celebrity-ish, not all. Get me out of here.
Amazing, Paul. Thank you so much. Yes, Paul was everywhere on social media. We tweeted it from our account at F1 Dirty Side on Twitter. But Paul was everywhere on the weekend warm-up. He walked by. Kim Illman had pictures. Super Little Guy had him in the pictures. He was on the Sky Sports feed. It was just an epic weekend. Paul, you deserve it, man.
And just before we go on to our new In the Marbles feature, one thing I forgot to mention during all of this that I didn't even see, I don't know if you've seen, but my son said it before I came down here to record this, was Verstappen apparently, from the replays, at the restart, the final restart where he cut right across Lewis, is like way outside his box, and everybody in previous weeks has been done for this. Now, I haven't seen it, so I don't know.
I saw it.
This is a teenage son saying, "Oh, look, Verstappen was outside his box." But
so I think it was the front. He was up at the front of the box, and he was on the line, but not over the line. And I think that was the situation. It wasn't on the sides where he was. Esteban and Fernando were hanging out on the sides. He was up right. Tippy top, right at the top corner, front of the box. I think he was on the line, and I think that's okay. At least that's what I've read
now
from
to
Crofty.
see if I've just been googling now to see if I can find anything. I know Haas had lodged an official challenge to the whole finish because obviously Hulk would have finished fourth, right? And like Paul said, Valtteri I think was up. Was it third?
Well, no, he was fourth. After this is what I meant to say when we were talking earlier. He was fourth after the carnage of the restart.
Oh,
if they kept those Sainz was third. So if they'd given Sainz the penalty, which they did, and if they kept that order, then they'd have done the procession under safety car to the checkered flag, and Nico would have had his first ever podium.
Yeah, and Valtteri was up to 7th or 8th, I think. He'd actually, the onboard of Valtteri's, I mean, talk about lightning reactions. He was in the midst of all of the carnage that was going on. I don't know how he tippy-toed his way through all of that. I mean, and like Paul said, very kind of frustrating as to, had they gone far enough, they know where the cars are. So why does it have to go through some arbitrary line of the first sector? Just freeze it where you flag it. When you know what time you hit the red flag, and then freeze the image at that and say this is the positions at the time of red flag.
Well, and I'm thinking as we're watching this, the two options, go back to the last restart or keep it as it is in the red flag pit lane and then pull them out as they are in order. Either Hulkenberg, if there's a Carlos penalty, Hulkenberg gets his first podium, or Fernando goes from last to podium because he'd been spun around. So someone's getting the third place spot, who really would be an interesting story, and it turned out it was Fernando.
Yep. So you've heard from us two bozos, our views. We've heard the living legend that is Pit Lane Paul. But now, for the first time ever on the dirty side of the track, we are going into the marbles, and we will get a 10-word race review from listener Lee.
Hi, this is Lee, also known as Insane Lee 13 from England, and my 10-word review of Australia is George! Spins, chaos, red flags, on fire, mayhem, and lame finish. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Lee. So I'll give...
Nailed it.
I'm prepared, so here's one for Lee. Yeah, that was lame finish. That was chaos. It was wild. If you'd like, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a nice little break. We introduced this and we'll wait a month until the next race. But after every race, feel free to submit to us a 10-word race review. Your name, where you're from, give us your 10-word race review. Send us an audio file. Just record an audio file on your phone. Email it to us, dirtysideofthetrack@gmail.com. And we will play a couple every time after each race. And we'd love to hear from you guys what you thought of the race. It doesn't have to be sentences, words, phrases, just no profanity. And we will play it. So that was cool, Lee. Thanks for being our test pilot on that. A couple last things just to close out before we get to fantasy. I already mentioned this. You know what? There's a couple stats in here, so we might as well use a jingle jangle. Substars. Australian Grand Prix Middle of the Night edition. So as I said, first race to feature 3 red flags. I still think we could have had 1. Maybe 2 at most, but that's okay. We finished under the safety car. Last time we did that, you already mentioned this, Rob, Monza last year. And we mentioned this on the last pod. Verstappen never won in Melbourne. He'd been third one time. This time he made it to the top step of the podium. We saw it was his 80th career podium finish, ties him with Senna's total. And now this is something my wife used to pick up on as the races would finish. I'd always say it was Verstappen and Hamilton and Bottas in some order. But the Verstappen-Hamilton category, that duo, has now finished 34 times, whichever order you like, but 34 times Verstappen and Hamilton 1-2, more than any other driver pairing in history. Fernando Alonso took his 3rd consecutive podium finish for the first time since 13, and this was interesting. And they mentioned this on the commentary, and at this point I was bleary-eyed trying to go to bed. But having that trio, Verstappen, Hamilton, Alonso, was the first time we've had 3 champions on the podium together since Hungary of 2018, when it was Hamilton, Vettel, and Raikkonen. And this time we had 11 championships between Max, Fernando, and Lewis. There were 2 Aston Martins in the top 4 for the first time in their history. McLaren, this is amazing, McLaren ended up Lando P6, Oscar P8 because of the chaos at the end. A team that had no points ends up with, I think, 14. All of a sudden, a great haul for them. Hulkenberg was 7th for Haas, the team's best result since Austria last year. And then here's Yuki Tsunoda, P10. Because of that penalty for Carlos, he dropped all the way from wherever he had been on the restart, 4th. He went all the way back down to 12th. But so it was 1 place outside at the last 3 races, as we'd heard, in 11th. He made it up to 10. And this is the last note I'll have. Teammate 2 notes. Charles Leclerc went out on lap 1 for the 5th time in his F1 career. 5th time. So he didn't finish, just as a quick aside, he didn't finish Bahrain. He didn't finish now in Australia. And, he, I would say it wasn't exactly a great finish for him when he was like, what am I supposed to do out here driving around Saudi Arabia? Not a great start for Charles. And sorry, as I said, I had one other note here. George, the DNF was his first mechanical retirement as a Mercedes driver, and it's his 2nd retirement for the team. Do you remember his first retirement?
I guess it's when he stopped to go and check on
Yes.
Zhou, and then he kind of ran back over to the marshals and said, don't touch the car, but they did.
Right.
Because
he thought he could keep going, but he went to check on Zhou. And I mentioned this because I had a few people over, And we were kind of looking at some stuff in between the Yukon game ending and before the grid walk really got underway. And somehow they asked about, how dangerous is it? And I showed them some of the crashes. And the Joe crash came up on the screen and we were watching it. And the fact, just again, I'm like, this guy's George. He gets out of the car and he runs and they see him. And he's like the first person to arrive. Everyone's like, get out there and help him, looking for the marshals or somebody, as he's pinned sideways. So, George, good on you, buddy, for, again, doing that last year. Your second ever retirement, first time mechanical. Those are the facts and stats from Australia.
Nice. What are we going to do now, Brian? Are we going to go and take a walk down DRS Street, or are we going to and do fantasy now? Do you want to do a longer fantasy next week? What's your wish?
How about a quick fantasy just to wrap it up?
Let's do it. Let's go for it.
All right. So in Australia, we had a handful of people playing what is called the template, as a lot of people who do the fantasy would know. We had number one this week, Mick Lapham, 423 points. Holy guacamole. Bono, my tires are dead, 390. Busy Bee Racing, that's JP, 351. I'm trying to remember. They don't give you the name of the people, so if I'm screwing this up, I apologize to people. 4 or Sure, 347. These are massive weeks. At Alan Giron, we've mentioned that name before, 343 as well, with DLV's 100 seconds guest, 343. And then a boatload of people in 7th position. Like so many, I'm not going to name them all. It would take forever. They played the template, as did I. That's my team. I was 7th as well, which is triple Red Bull, triple Aston Martin, and Joe. And so that got us all into 7th place this week. I'm sorry for not naming everybody. Again, there's just so many. But that brought the league. We now have a new leader at the end of Australia after 3 races. Busy Bee Racing with 1,021 points. That's JP. Good job, JP.
Well
jumping
done,
into
Busy
first.
Bees.
Yes. And I am second, 10-17, so 4 points behind. 4 or Sure in third, right behind. And then right behind again, this is super tight at the top, at Alan Giron, Mick Lapham, and then we have a tie for 6 with DLVs and Blacks for Strap-On. So every time it gets me. 8th, Neon Genesis F1 team, and 9th, Lear SF23, and a handful of people at 10th, which, again, I won't name everybody. But a great fantasy week. This thing takes 17 hours to update. I was checking throughout the night, morning, evening, and it finally updated right as we came live. So good job to everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. We have a little break now, obviously. But while we get ready for the break, how about a DRS conversation?
Yeah, we caught up with Brett, and Brett is a friend of a previous DRS guest, Josh. So there's a little bit of rivalry here, and I'm loving the fact that there's rivalry starting to grow in the DRS. Given that we don't actually score it in any way, shape, or form, I'm loving the fact people are coming on to, in inverted commas, beat each other. So feel free to come on and volunteer to be on DRS. We love having folk on. It's one of the best parts of doing this is those chats that we have with folk before they come on, and then actually during the DRS. So let's drop in and listen to Catching Up with Brett.
We are super excited to have Brett with us on the 100 Seconds of DRS, and getting a chance to know Brett a little bit. We were chatting before this. 2 things super fascinating jumped out right away. 1, he introduced Josh, who also was on the 100 Seconds of DRS, to F1. And 2, he races dirt bikes, like for real. So, Brett, welcome to the 100 Seconds of DRS, man.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's dig into a couple of those things. First of all, you introduced Josh to F1. How long have you been kind of tuning into F1 whenever you get a chance?
So my dad and I used to watch it, I don't know, probably back in the late middle school, high school days. So, I don't know, 2010 to maybe 2016, in between NASCAR. So, been following it a little bit since then, but the whole Drive to Survive series came about, so I'm kind of in that category. And then some of the online F1 racers like Team at Marduk and Jimmy Broadbent and those guys, I was watching those when COVID hit, so I was working from home and kept that on the laptop on the side. The old employer doesn't need to know about that, but it's all good.
I watched a lot of that too, actually. A lot of the streamers who have the F1 stuff. I watched a lot of those races and their videos too during COVID.
Yeah,
so,
super entertaining.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what made you then, because obviously like we were chatting before, you used to kind of swim with Josh, and for anybody that didn't hear Josh on 100 Seconds, Josh is one of my kids, or a couple of my kids' swim coach. What made you decide to get out of the water and start herring around on a dirt bike and leaping ridiculous number of feet into the air?
Yeah, so my cousin actually has been doing it for a couple of years now, and his younger kids do it, and they urged me to get a dirt bike, and then he was just like, hey, there's this race on the other side of town. You should do it. I'm like, I just got my dirt bike last month, but whatever. It's all good. I like competition. So did that. And then 2 hours later, I was like, I think I should probably go write a will to leave everything that I own. But yeah, it was good. We actually went out to a restaurant after that and caught the last of one of the F1 races. I think they were just finishing up. I can't remember which one. It was in July. So that was good. It was a good mix of the two. But yeah, just need some competition. You know, we've been competing in swimming for so long with Josh, and 8 years of that, and then you graduate and you don't have anything else going on. So just some competition is good.
But 2 weeks into having the dirt bike, you were in a competition already?
Yeah, it was 2 or 3 weeks. The thing wasn't even broken in. I bought it brand new, which was fiscally irresponsible. But it's all good. Yeah,
that's amazing. So then, now we're chatting a little bit between the dirt bike racing and the time you're out on Sundays, missing some of the races for Formula One. How often do you get a chance to kind of watch F1? And like, what's the thing that now? Because I also love Drive to Survive. Like, what's the thing now that kind of keeps you interested whenever you get a chance to watch F1? Is it for you, is it the history and what you've done in the past? Is it drivers? Is it teams, technology? Like, when you kind of think back, like, what really kind of says, hey, Brett, I got a little time on my hands this morning. I'm going to go watch an F1 race.
Yeah, that's a great question. So a couple of things. I think I like those docu-series on any sports. So I'll sit there and watch those. I like to know the back end of the behind the scenes, what's going on. And then, so following the history was really cool. I think Top Gear and Jeremy Clarkson did like a segment on Ayrton Senna, and I watched that. That was phenomenal. And then that Michael Schumacher documentary came out a couple of years ago. That was just,
that's awesome.
That was so cool. So just keeping up with that. Any motor racing is very intriguing to me. I don't really care about basketball or football or any of that. So that fills the void. And the interesting thing is, once COVID hit and all the F1 drivers are sitting at home, they were streaming, so they would get on the F1 game and watch them do races. And Charles in his banana costume never gets old. That's going to be a meme forever. And
Totally.
Lando Norris he was so good at that. He doesn't do it much anymore. But and then you have the podcast, like you guys, just putting out really good content and very informative information. And then my latest favorite is Rocket Powered Mohawk on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen that, but that's just, those race recap videos are phenomenal.
I haven't, but I will now.
Stuff like that. It's so funny. It's you probably want to put your kids in the other room because it's not safe for work, but it's just, he does a good job, so it's cool.
And so that's you and your way into the sport right now. Say this season, is there a particular team driver that you pull for, or is it just kind of want a good race above everything else?
I think I think when I first really started paying attention to practice qualifying and the race weekends, I think Lando Norris stood out. I've always liked McLaren. I've always liked the road cars. But I think that team, and then Lando being a big internet sensation that he was, kind of that the timeline kind of came about perfectly and just kind of sucked me in. So I like McLaren. I like Ferrari, and indifferent about Mercedes and all those guys. But
so really, then, like me, you're a bit of a glutton for punishment because you're a Ferrari fan and a McLaren fan, which really isn't serving you too well so far this year.
No, it's awful. It's ridiculous. I don't know where McLaren went so wrong. They have two like super strong drivers, and it's just very disappointing to see. But they'll come back at some point. Maybe not this year, but hopefully next year. And then Ferrari just does Ferrari things, so you never know.
I mean, you've got it down. Are you also any chance a Cubs fan? Because the just wait for next year is like the slogan of Ferrari, McLaren, and the Chicago Cubs. That's been like the three places in the world where you just wait for next year.
Oh, that's so disappointing that there's another version of those two teams out there. That's awful. That's terrible.
Oh man! So big question then. The one thing that definitely won't interfere with dirt bar racing, I imagine, unless you do it at night, is we've got the Australian Grand Prix coming up in a week's time. So you're going to be staying up to watch that?
Yeah, we will. I'm going to make sure Josh stays up. I'm going to give him his sippy cup and his late night snack, and make sure he stays awake past 11 because he fell asleep in the middle of it last year, and we were watching it with one of our other friends that's in Connecticut, and we called him out on it, and he didn't believe that he fell asleep. So yeah, we'll be awake.
Excellent.
I love that. Rob and I are also trying to kind of stay awake and see if we can make it through the race. And Rob's already announced on our Discord server that he'll be taking a nap in the afternoon.
I may have to take a tactical nap late afternoon to be fired up for the race. It may have to happen.
Bro, you don't have to admit how old you are by saying you're taking a nap. Just do it and don't tell anybody.
Hey, I'm 28. I understand how it is. You need to get a couple hours and, try and stay up.
I'm only a couple years older than 28, 38. Yeah, so no, totally get it. Yeah, it's just a number, except unless it's big. And so anyway, that's great. Well, good luck watching that. It's going to be a fun race, and I'm excited for hopefully McLaren coming back sooner than later. It felt like the car had pace after the first race, and I expected so much more in the second race in Saudi Arabia, and it just didn't go right. I don't know. I guess we'll see.
That's a tough track for them. You have those sweeping corners, and it's fast, and they don't have the engine for it. But I think they brought a couple of upgrades. I think Albert Park will be pretty good for them, but we will see. They just have to keep that steering wheel programmed correctly.
I just could say you are the absolute perfect blend of the glutton for punishment, like myself, and the eternal optimist that next race is going to be the good one. I love it. It's amazing.
You have to have optimism. You're not rooting for a team like Williams. You have to have it. They've shown some moments of brilliance with Ricardo and Lando and in Russia, and we'll see. But it's not looking too good right now. But you got to look up.
Exactly. No, I agree with you. I fully agree with you. It's like everyone teases me for believing that, there's still a chance that I'm going to live to see another Ferrari championship. But I'm kind of worried that the Schumacher years was it. I've had my moment. That was the one, teams, it goes through cycles. Different teams dominate different eras. We've had Ferrari, we've had Mercedes. Right now we're in a Red Bull. Don't know. I'm an optimist. Ferrari will be back next season.
Hopefully. I really hope so. I like seeing Max win. I think he's the best driver on the grid by far, and then Alonso. But that team definitely deserves to be winning right now because of Mercedes winning 7 or 8 years in a row. So
agree. It will be just and actually just before we move over to taking on your challenge, just on that note, it'll be interesting to see what happens to Max as we flash forward, say, 10 years, because people have very short memories. And there was an on this day, as we were recording here on the Friday, there was the on this day that it was the famous multi-21 for Red Bull, which was that Webber was winning the race. They were told to hold station. Seb should come in behind Webber and let Webber take the victory. Only Seb's a competitor, so he said, up yours, and he overtook and won the Grand Prix, and there was an amazing cool-down room tension moment. And everyone loves Seb now, and they look back at him, oh, he's amazing, he's such a nice guy, we miss him, he's retiring. And that's what happens when they get older and they're not the winner anymore and they're about to retire. Everybody falls in love with them and forgets they had this time when they hated them. And I'm seeing Fernando, everyone loves Fernando now, but used to hate him back in the day.
He was the villain 2 years ago even.
So it'd be interesting. Everyone hates Max at the moment, just I really think out of pure jealousy. He's so good and he's in the best car. Be interesting to see what happens in 10 years' time if suddenly it's old Father Max and everyone loves him.
Yeah, I don't think people give him enough credit for how funny he can be. I think, Rock Power Mohawk made a joke in one of his videos. He said, over the summer break, he went back and hung upside down like a bat until he could race again. when everybody else is playing golf. I think that's true, but it's I think, yeah, you're right. In 10 years time, he's going to get his dues. And I think he's a good driver. He's mostly fair, unless we're in Brazil and Checo needs to pass him again for points. But for the most part, he's pretty good.
Yeah, come on, mate. We already talked about this. I'm not letting him through. Leave me alone. Yeah. All right. So as Rob said, Brett, this is a great opportunity to do the 100 seconds of DRS because you're obviously a competitive person. You have those competitive juices flowing, and you just want to show Josh how much better you are than him. And so we are excited for this opportunity for you to prove your dominance.
That's the plan.
That is the plan.
So, Brian, you're asking the questions. I'm running the timer. So
well, I'm going to ask the questions, but are you going to tell me I'm asking them too slowly again?
Well, I mean, maybe. I mean, this is why I'm feeling a little bit sorry here that, he won't get to beat Josh because I think I ask the questions and I tend to have a decent tempo, whereas Brian... I'm sorry, you're not that bad. Right. Are you ready to ask super slow-mo questions,
by the way,
Brian?
even if it's not the quantity of questions we get through and answers, it's the quality. And so it's subjective and in the eye of the beholder. Yes, I'm ready to ask questions.
Brett, are you ready to listen to his slow-mo questions and answer them?
Slow-mo questions, you got it.
Okay, here we go. 100 seconds of DRS in 3, 2, 1, begin.
Is it pronounced GIF or GIF?
Yes.
Best racing movie of all time?
Days of Thunder.
Yes. Best F1 driver on the grid currently?
Max Verstappen.
How about best young driver in F1?
Boy. Maybe, that's the thing. Maybe Lando? I think Lando.
That's a great answer. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
If you could add a James Bond type gadget to an F1 car, what would it be?
The ejecto seat.
Well said. Fill in the blank. F1 in America is...
Fantastic, unless it's in Miami.
Oh, wow. Best F1 driver of all time?
Michael Schumacher.
Best thing to do on a rainy day?
Sleep.
Speaking of rain, wet race or dry race?
Dry race.
What is your least favorite television program?
The View.
What's your favorite food?
Tacos, definitely.
Excellent call. What's your favorite non-F1 sport?
Motocross.
And if you could swap the cars out in F1 for a different type of racing transportation, what would it be?
That's such a good question. Mopeds. I think that'd be awesome.
Seb would come out of retirement. Is there a film you haven't watched that shocks people when you tell them that?
The Godfather.
Wow.
And time on that bombshell.
Wow, that's a great answer. So, I thought I had a good answer to that one. I think you might beat me.
I've never seen it.
Wow. So my wife loves all the Godfathers, and so I've had to watch them with her. They're good, but I don't know if you're missing that much. I've never seen Star Wars or any of the Star Wars, and people blows their mind.
That's right.
Yeah, it's my icebreaker when I go to one of we do those stupid work things, and they're like, "Oh, tell us something interesting about you." I've never seen Star Wars, and then I just let the room mumble for a little while and move on from there.
As looks of distrust are cast around at Brian.
What's wrong with this guy? But
that's such a good icebreaker because you can just say that it's one sentence, and then you can just everybody else can talk for you for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah, I don't have to reveal too much more about myself. I'm good. But anyway, that was great. So Godfather, great. And then Schumacher, I totally agree. Days of Thunder, that's, I think, the second time now, maybe third, where we've had Days of Thunder as favorite racing movie. I love Days of Thunder.
It's great. My cousin, who got me into dirt biking, he races cars too, so that's his favorite. And it's just a couple times a year we'll sit down and watch that. It's not historic, it's not accurate by any means, but the acting in it is great, and a couple of scenes will go down in history. I think it's just very entertaining. And then Cars, the movie Cars. I mean, come on now.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Cars is very solid. It's a great movie to watch. when you're kind of not expecting it to be great, and it is. By the way, I will actually yell at people when we pull up to places, "Let me out of the car, Cole," in an Australian accent. Like when we "Let me out of the car, Cole," and then they don't get it if they've not seen the movie. So I love anyway. Next Days of Thunder.
That's your Australian accent, is it, Brian?
Not really. I didn't want to go full Australian accent and be terrible. So. Well, Brett, thank you so much for doing this. This was tremendous. It was great to get to know you. And I'm sorry, Josh. Brett's in first of the swimming friends, so he's now winning. But that was amazing. Thank you for doing that. And it was great to get to know you. And if anyone else wants to do the 100 seconds of DRS, hit us up at F1 Dirty Side on Twitter. Thanks so much, Brett.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, I love it. I do. I love it. And we got a few in the bag at the moment, so we got a few more to roll out. I think we've probably got 2 or 3. Have we in the locker now, Brian? Or is it just one? I don't know. 2. Yeah. 2 in the locker. So
we have 3. We're going to hear from Darren. We're going to hear from Walter, and then we're going to hear from Lizzie.
That's right. So, and we've got a bit of a China-shaped hole now that those will drop into over the next few weeks. So, don't be shy. Don't let our well of DRS run dry. Please volunteer and come on. When we've had, I think when we finally get around to Liz's, she was mega nervous coming on, and now she can vouch for the fact there is nothing to be nervous about. You guys know more than we do, so it's good fun. So please volunteer. The easiest way to do it is through Twitter, but if you want to drop a mail into dirtysideofthetrack@gmail.com, you can do it there. Same way as you can for sending in your In the Marbles reviews. And the same way, again, I'm going to go one more time for you musically inclined folk out there. You heard Brian play a Sapstat jingle today. We didn't play the Pit Lane Paul intro today, Brian. We messed that one up, didn't we? Oh, yeah, well, never mind. Because we're waiting for somebody to send another one in. That's what we really want, is another Pit Lane Paul jingle. So, no race next week. No race for 1,000 years now, it feels like. We're going to go off and crawl into a little dark hole and work out what content we're going to come up with. We're going to hope to get some guests on to give you guys something to listen to. What you got, Brian, to close us out?
It was a crazy race. I hope everyone gets a chance here in the States to catch up on your sleep. No matter where you're watching it, we hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.